Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. China will host the 2016 Group of 20 Summit in the eastern city of Hangzhou on September the 4th and the 5th, where leaders will be discussing vital issues for the world economy. Can the organization continue to play a significant role in global governance? What can China accomplish with its G20 presidency, and what contributions might Chinese wisdom make to the group as it undergoes transformation? To discuss these issues and more today, I'm pleased to be joined by Wang Wen, Executive Dean of the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China, and Wang Huiyao, President of the Center for China and Globalization. Also, Fraser Cameron, Director of the EU Asia Center, will join our discussion via telephone. Before we get started, let's take a look at this.
Well, this is obviously the most important meeting this year, given the case that the international financial system is in a grave crisis. We have never recovered from the 2008 crisis, and we're at a situation where people now saying that there may be another crisis bigger than 2008. So that the meeting is occurring in a very important juncture in the economic policy.
The G7 is only just over 30% of the world economy. So the agreement of economic policy at the G7 is no longer adequate to take the world economy forward, and this means therefore the role of the G20 becomes much more critical in order to arrive at agreement on economic policies.
Well, I think in many ways this summit is a transition. It's a transition, as Chinese leaders have said, from firefighting to creating a longer-term pattern of growth. And that's important. It's also a transition, I think, for China on the world stage to come from being part of the international community to being one of the leaders in the international community. So I think it has a lot of importance, the fact that the G20 is getting together in China. That said, I don't expect this to have a new set of global rules come out, or we're not going to solve everyone's problems. Many of the economic problems we have to deal with have to be dealt with individually by each of the countries. But the G20 started off saying we need to get growth and we need to not do bad things. We need to not put in new restrictions on trade or restrictions on investment. And in a general sense, that's still the agenda. But we're going to get growth now by doing structural reforms and internal reforms in the economies. And we're going to stop the bad things from happening by a greater state of vigilance, I think, to make sure that people don't put in new rules that make it harder for growth to happen.
Welcome to Dialogue. China will for the first time play host to the Group of 20 Summit in Hangzhou. What do you think will be the major priorities on the agenda of the presidency?
It's really important to have all the leaders to come. So it will be very important for China to point out its thinking and its plan for this. We know that it has proposed the 4I for this conference, such as innovative, interconnected, and inclusive, and also invigorated. So I think those probably going to put new impetus to the agenda of the G20 summit, and will help to shape the future development of the G20.
So among the 4 I's, which one is most impressive for you?
So actually, to my honesty, all the 4 words are very impressive, very important for China to host for the G20 summit. So actually, according to my experience, the 4 I's is based on the 3 I's, which Turkey hosted the G20 summit last year. What about the 3 I's? I can tell you one very interesting story. That is, the 3 I's means investment, inclusive growth, and implementation. So last year when I was in Turkey, I heard a very interesting analysis from a Western scholar. The guy said that we should add the 4th I to the Turkey's 3 I's. Mm-hmm. That is impossible. What does that mean? That means that he said, because Turkey wants to push the implementation. That is impossible. Why? Because Turkey have no enough power to promote the implementation of the global governance. So this year, we use the 4 I's So we have the same one eyes with similar eyes with Turkey, that is inclusive, and there the other eyes, that is innovation, as you said, the invigorated and interconnected. So the other three eyes is one kind of the innovation. So innovation, what does that mean? That is nowadays, the economic growth in the world is very low. We have the low growth. So we need the innovation, not only technology innovation, but also the institution innovation. The second is connected. That means, nowadays, if we look at the Euro-Asia continent, the two sides is very developed, but inside of the continent is very, undeveloped. So we need interconnected. So more interconnected, more growth. And the third is invigorated. That means nowadays we have the world economy have too much protectionism, trade protectionism, investment protectionism. So we need passion. We need more passion. That's one kind of the invigorated. So then we have the similar word with Turkey. That's inclusive. Inclusive, that means development should include those poor, those undeveloped country. So I think that the four words are all very, very important.
In short, the four eyes,
yes.
For the subject matter of this G20 summit in Hangzhou will not be impossible. Right? Let me cross over to Fraser Cameron, our regular commentator on Euro-Asia issues. Hello, Fraser.
Yes, hello.
Hi. What do you think of the implications of the four eyes, which mean innovative, invigorated, interconnected, and inclusive? Which one do you think among the four is most meaningful for a success of this G20 in Hangzhou?
I think inclusive. I think it's important that we try and ensure that the summit recognizes that the global economy is now so interdependent that the impact in one part of the world touches another, for example, Brexit. So there needs to be a recognition that we really all have a shared destiny here in ensuring that we can recover economic growth, because without economic growth, so many of the other problems will simply not be able to be tackled.
Mr. Wang Wen here in the Beijing studio spoke of the issue of trade protectionism and investment protectionism. He therefore emphasized the importance of being invigorative. What do you think of the consequences arising from a politician's choice of protectionism during a year of election?
Well, this is a serious problem. If you look at the trends in the United States, all the presidential candidates have come out against TPP, for example. In Europe, there are serious concerns about the new trade deal with both the United States and Canada. So I think this is a serious issue that we have to make a case for the benefits of globalization, and China has to play its part in this. I mean, China has been one of the main beneficiaries of globalization over the last couple of decades, so it has to take a leading role in making the case for free trade.
Thank you very much. I'll get back to you in a few minutes. Dr. Wang, don't you think that there is an ongoing campaign of deglobalization or reglobalization, so to speak? Because whenever there are multilateral meetings on WTO, Uruguay round of the WTO, G20, APEC, whatever you mention it, there would always be large crowds outside the conferences hall who protest against globalization because there are more refugees and illegal immigrants. These are the things that Donald Trump opposes vehemently in the presidential campaign, to say nothing of terrorist attacks, which, according to the spokesperson of the far-right movement in continental Europe, actually arises from a sharp rise in the asylum-seeking waves, threatening the social stability in continental Europe, as well as the fundamental principles that help found the European Union.
Yeah, I think that's that precisely that's the importance of this G20 is so relevant. I think Fraser was right. I mean, we talked about this anti-globalization movement actually is accelerating, particularly symbolized by Donald Trump. I mean, he openly said at his acceptance speech that he's going to practice Americanism and anti-globalism. As a matter of fact, I mean, as we all know, for the last number of half century since the World War II, I mean, all the countries benefited from globalization, and China is also obviously one of the biggest beneficiaries as well. I mean, after we joined the WTO, for example, China's GDP has gone up 7 times, and same for the China's trade. But now there's a danger now. We are seeing that there's probably a WTO, as you mentioned, the Doha round still hasn't finished a lot of its discussion, and then we see fragmented regional trading scheme is being established, like TPP, TTIP, and also probably RCEP and all the others. So I think it's probably still we need to at least have this G20 to regain the focus of all those countries, to put back into the free trader, if it's put back the attention into that globalized scheme and establish this, maintain the safety of this globalization, so that we can continue to prosper in the future. And also now we are also the international trade growth, according to WTO Secretary General, is the lowest in the last number of years, the trade growth in the world. So it's dangerous now actually to continue to do that with Britain leaving EU and with American so strongly oppose globalization.
Wang Wen, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, has recently cut its global economic growth forecasts to 3.1% for the year 2016 and 3.4% in 2017. Do you believe in this context, with the adversity of such circumstances, China would still play the role of a powerhouse to help facilitate the world economic recovery?
Of course. I can share some information to you about the GDP growth. Because nowadays I agree that nowadays the GDP growth is very dangerous. Why? Because we can observe the history. Since 2000 and 2007, the average world GDP growth it's about 4.5%. And then, in 2008 and 2009, the GDP growth slowed down very quickly. And then, since 2009 to 2014, the average GDP growth of the world is only the 3.5. And according to you said, the database still slowed down very quickly. That means nowadays, not only the 2015, but also in this year or next year, we still face the slowdown attention of the GDP growth of the world. So that means back to the G20, we need a G20. G20 should...
Excuse me, but many people say, ironically, G20 is only a talking shop.
No,
we
I
talk
don't
about
think so.
the talk.
No, I don't think so.
Don't you think it's high time to have a secretariat to help execute the ideas?
Yeah, actually nowadays, because we have the G20, invite not only the 20 countries leaders, but also the other emerging economies. They sit together and discuss each other. And policy coordination. This is very important because as we mentioned that we have too many trade protectionism, investment, and then if we coordinate the policies, then we can unite it and push the next round, the next wave of GDP growth in the world. But additionally, the G20 could help the emerging country, but also those poor country to have the new growth implementation policies. So I think the G20 have now have more and more functions than before.
Thank you very much. Let me cross over to Fraser Cameron, who is still on the phone. Excuse me. But Fraser, what do you think should be the most important driving force behind the next round of urbanization in the case of China, or for the global economic recovery? Do you think the spirit of innovation will play a pivotal role?
Yes, I do. I think innovation is going to be the key to the next stage of economic growth in China, as we've seen in the United States, in Korea and other countries. So I think having some kind of global consensus on the key factors affecting innovation, particularly the sort of e-commerce, where China is already playing a leading role, will be hugely important here. And here I think there has to be some progress on cybersecurity, for example, because consumers are obviously going to be very concerned that their new transactions, when they deal with e-commerce are going to be secure. And this is a global issue and has to be tackled by the G20. But you're right, innovation has to be at the center of the next stage of economic growth.
Thank you very much. You are watching Dialogue with Mr. Wang Huiyao and Mr. Wang Wen. We are discussing subject matter of the upcoming G20 summit in the eastern city of Hangzhou, Zhejiang province. I'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back, sir. For the past 25 years, Harry, the international system with its win-win economic structures has been relatively stable, but many experts point out that this order is under challenge and threat, and that it is eroding now. Do you agree? Is the world economy entering an era of I win, you lose?
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I mean, we can see that, for example, the first generation of the Bretton Woods international system, like we see United Nations, World Bank, IMF, WTO, G7, that has really has gone relatively well. I mean, until recent number of years. We see that WTO Doha round has been never concluded, and has actually been marginalized, the WTO. And now we see, on the American side we have TPP, TTIP, and we see on the Asian side we have RCEP, AIIB, OBOR. I mean, it's actually, we are not participating in your system. You are not participating in our system. So it's actually, we see a two economic governing system is taking shape. And that's, I think, it's probably dangerous, because we need to really unify that. I think that's why the G20 needs to demonstrate its leadership. I agree with you that G20 really needs a secretarial office permanently, maybe can be established in China or elsewhere, that implementing that, because we see, G7, they have one set of system, and then we have seen BRICS countries have a system where there's no developing north-south or north-north country glued together, and G20 is exactly for that.
So always, I think, actually, in the history, the international game, it's you lose, I win. Even especially, even at the end of the history, at the end of the Cold War, the game still existed. For example, just last week I was in Africa. All the African country, they think about his development model. They talking about that, in the past 25 years, Africa lost so much in the globalizations, especially those countries who follow the Western model. So nowadays, they will think it over. And then he said, okay, maybe the China development experience could be shared by us. So on the one hand, we admit that the game is still a little bit zero game. You lose, I win. But on the other hand, because of China's rise bring more and more benefits for the world, especially for those poor countries. So I saw in Africa, China invest in the infrastructure, China help those poor people in a poor country. So I think this is a positive influence of the rise of China. Because of the new model of the great power rise, the world, I believe, will become more and more better than before.
The thing is, on the one hand, we have the disintegration of the existing, if not the old, trade regime or multilateral trade blocs. On the other hand, China has been working very hard to sign FTA with individual economies on our periphery or with other major economies, instead of relying on WTO or multilateral trade blocs. So what do you think of this particular effort?
Well, I think that helps. For example, China has gone into the free trade agreement with South Korea and Australia.
But our bilateral relations
declining.
It's declining
absolutely.
Because
we're having some risk there. But I still, by and large, I still think this global established system, which China is participating and China is benefiting, it should be maintained. And China has actually, China's public said, we're not trying to change or threaten the existing the global trading system. So I think probably it's important that we have to stop this kind of a win-lose mentality, and actually China going to take some leadership to make this global trading system that works. So I'm very glad to see that when the G20 trade minister gathered in Shanghai, for the first time they issued a statement that they're going to actually support the WTO and then the trading liberalization of the global system. So that's very important.
So actually this year, when China hosted the G20 summit in Hangzhou, we have the one very important achievement in trade field. That is, we push the trade or commercial minister annual conference institutionalizations. So that means since this year, in the future, every year we have the trade minister annual meeting. What does that mean? That means they can push those G20 trade ministers sit together and talking about the trade problems. So I think in the past we have no such a conference. The G7 can control all the trade condition, but now the emerging countries, have the more and more power.
Let's talk about the role you play in formulating policy options for the Chinese authorities as a think tank. I mean, so many people are talking about think tanks. In fact, I don't know whether they are real think tanks or not, but you guys, you from CCG and you, Chongyang, are increasingly recognized as an independent force for drafting policy options for the government. Throughout the process of getting G20 prepared, Wang, taking your Chongyang as an example, what have you done?
So actually, as a think tank scholars, we have the responsibility to explain the real conditions to the public, not only public but also the decision maker. So as you're talking about, I cannot agree with you about even an emerging economy still slow down, but it's a very short term problem. So we have to explain it about it. So some of the emerging economy still slow down, but some emerging economy, still very, very good economy. For example, India, even China. So nowadays, as a think tank, on the one hand, we have to explain to help the public and the government to understand the real condition. On the other hand, that is, we suggest the decision makers to implement or promote something. So as a G20, we do the G20 for many years, and we coordinate, we communicate with the other G20 countries.
For example, what are the major issues that you have discussed with other participants and representatives of the think tanks from other countries at the meetings you hosted here?
Yeah, of course. In the past 3 years, we organized 3 years annual T20 meetings, and every T20 meeting we invite more than 1,000 think tank scholars in China or in the other countries, and we sit together, discuss and think about for the government, for the decision makers. And if in the T20 levels we have the common sense about the policy recommendations, we can recommend the policy to the decision makers of the G20 members. So that's one kind of the power of the think tank in the past several years. So I think this is very, very important.
Henry, your interpretation about the think tank during this period of transition and when China is rising as a powerhouse?
It's very important. As we know that the system in China is that it's a highly centralized government, and decision making is top-down approach is very fast. So if a decision is made good, then it's really generates such a big high efficiency. But if it's a bad decision made, it will be disastrous. So in Chinese situation, probably calls for more think tank thinking than other countries in the world, probably more than the United States, because in the future, if I really think think tanks can be a supplementary to the more scientific and democratic decision-making process. And so this is very important. So for example, as this G20 meeting is concerned, we as a CCG, as a think tank, we've been discussing with Minister of Foreign Trade, of Commerce, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs as well. I mean, we sent a lot of recommendation to that. And personally, I'm sitting on the advisory committee of the Minister of Commerce, and I think that has helped to air our suggestions and recommendations. As a matter of fact, recently CCG has also promoted China to join IOM. So after all those goods movement with WTO, now with the people movement that IOM is looking after. So we're promoting the globalization and globalism, and making all those right recommendations and suggestions to the decision makers, as Wang just mentioned. I think that is really think tank can play a lot of role, and particularly for those fairly independent think tank where the decision process is really needed.
But one very important point I have to mention, because just now I forgot it. That is, 3 years ago, we find in the 2011 G20 leadership communique. In these communiques, they designed what will happen. We will host in 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015, and no mention about who is the host of the 2016. So 3 years ago, as a think tank, we find this is very important information. So we suggest that maybe China can hurry for the G20 host in 2016. Then the decision maker of China, find it. Oh, that's great. That's a very good suggestion. So that's why I think we contribute to the host very much.
There have been so many research organizations and institutions affiliated with the central government or authorities at different level. Why do you think the authorities should take proposals from think tanks like you guys very seriously? I mean, from the perspective of overseas observers, they would say you are in a communist regime, and therefore the independence, which is a very important integrity and virtue of a think tank, should come across as a universal value, and therefore their cooperation would largely depend on your integrity as a think tank. So, Wang Wen, do you think this is a serious problem?
Yes,
and a challenge.
So actually, as your slogan, ideas matter. So as a think tank, thinking matter. So nowadays, China, I think there exists a very serious condition, that is, the thinking or idea supply is less than the request from the government. So nowadays, the government decision maker need more and more thinking or more and more ideas supplies from not only those official think tank, but also those social think tank. So
what did President Xi Jinping say about the importance of think tanks?
Yes, in the past 3 years, President Xi mentioned about think tank over 20 times. That means maybe every month he talking about think tank. So 3 months ago, I met him and share my information, some very important suggestion to him, and he just listened about my suggestions very seriously, very silently. I think this is the real standpoint from the decision makers of the new administration of China.
I think this new administration of the Chinese government attaches great importance now to the think tank. As I mentioned, that China, the system now, as the economy has gone such a large scale, the decision process has been so complicated, and also the system is lacking enough debate sometimes, and also different comparison. So by having social think tank, private think tanks, or independent think tanks, that can reintegrate the whole think tank community. So there is a healthy competition among the think tanks, which can, just like 30 years ago when Deng Xiaoping opened a private business for the economy, now we have independent think tanks that will really help the policy market. It's the same reasoning. So the economy market, you need different forces and have a different competition. And the same is true for the policy market and thinking market. And so I think that's why there's more room for the think tank to play in China.
Thank you very much. This is indeed a very enlightening brainstorming session on dialogue about G20 in Hangzhou. I'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.